Ciao, here is a conversation with Yves Hilpisch. Yves is one of the founders of the Python Quants Group, a group focused on the applicability of Python and in particular machine learning techniques embedded in the Python language for the study of quantitative finance. We start talking about the goals of this group and the methodology followed by this group to reach a certain goal, and in particular focusing on the outreach activity done by such group. We talk about the social implications of algorithmic trading, in particular its relation with efficiency of markets, and also critical transitions such as financial crashes, whether bots, for example, can avoid them or be an additional problem in relation to such events. We also talk about the tension between having a first principles model-based approach, like a physical reasoning to finance, against a data-driven approach coming from artificial intelligence. Then we talk about some technicalities, why, for example, why using Pythons, what's the utility of Docker in this context, how one can start looking into sockets, APIs, and things like this. Then we go a little bit deeper and we talk about whether it's possible to find a model that can actually predict price, whether markets are efficient, and whether it makes sense to frame the quantitative finance problem as a proper scientific problem. Then we go into talking about cryptocurrency, his opinion about them, and also his opinion about non-fungible tokens. And from there we touch a bit on the problems and opportunities of the new generations, looking into financial literacy and the interest in investments in general. And so finally we talk about some ideas about risk management, like the Kelly criterion, and also some new approaches he's been looking into, mainly in the context of his works as in books, looking into reinforcement learning. So that's really interesting. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. It was really challenging and interesting, so I hope you enjoyed. All the links are in the description, really many links. I hope you can find the time to dig into them. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, support me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and support me financially if you can on Patreon, the link in the description. But mainly enjoy the conversation. So here's the conversation. I would like to start slowly, let's say, to know your background and things like that, and then to see where to properly edit the contents, because I think it's a bit artificial to start from the set of questions. If you could tell me a bit about your background, how you ended up doing the things you're doing.
That's a good question. Probably there have been so many crossroads in between, right, that you can't recall them. So I was always fascinated by financial topics. I mean, when I was pretty young, I was supposed to become a doctor, a medical doctor, right? Maybe dentist or some other discipline in this context. But I discovered for myself the fascination for business finance. And I started studying after my military service business administration, and immediately wanted to focus on the financial path, so to say, and studying financial theory, monetary theory, banking, and did all my thesis work in this context about M&A, about bank runs and deposit insurance. So I was always fascinated by formal mathematical modeling of economic or business issues. So this was what got me into that, and later on, basically just before I finished my diploma, I started already with my PhD work in mathematical finance. So this is what I then found for myself. It's still a passion up to date. Python came a little bit later.
I'm curious about
was from the beginning.
Because in your books you mentioned a lot about how basically in the 90s, I guess, not only with Python but with the availability of data in finance, it was possible to approach a problem from a more computer science perspective. Was this already something? Was this happening in the process of your PhD? or is this something that
No, actually, my PhD was more math oriented. So
right.
I had like lemmas, theorems, propositions, corollaries in there, right? Only a few numerical examples, but no coding whatsoever.
Right.
Today, I think this will probably not be possible anymore to write such a theoretical thesis, PhD thesis. Everybody needs to program some stuff up, right? And of course, we have now a completely different environment. You get your hands on tons of data. I needed to pay data set by data set back then when I was studying. So completely different times, and we now have more like a democracy here with many, many good commodities and public goods that everybody can use. Right?
Yeah, nice. And I guess that the work you're doing, I wouldn't call it outreach, but with dissemination of the work you've been doing is a continuation of this democratization. I mean, is there
yeah,
some,
sure. The whole industry is now driven by basically everybody trying to crunch large sets of numbers, right? And to this end, also unstructured data like news and social media feeds and whatever, right? And used to be like the domain of, let's say, the rocket scientists, as they were called back then, right? The physicists with their PhDs, they came to Wall Street and revolutionized at least certain areas there with their modeling or pricing, using user computers early on. But today, everybody needs to do that, right? If you come as an analyst to a bank and you've done your, I don't know, your whatever bachelor, whatever master, or an MBA or whatnot, right? You need to be able to program. So this is how we have come. It's not only that it's so nice to have, it's today, it's in many areas, in particular in the financial industry, it's a must-have. The programming, and Python is a language of choice because it's so convenient, it's efficient, and it's fast enough for most things, even if people are still out there and say, well, Python is too slow and this is 10 times faster. So I still need to see like good examples where we would say, well, yeah, that's not something for Python. When I started out with Python for finance, everybody was saying this doesn't work at all. And now everybody's using it, right? So we've come a long way. But of course, still people who are like.
And the argument against it was the efficiency.
Sorry?
And the argument against it was the speed, the computational efficiency.
Absolutely. This was always a speed thing, right? We need C++, we need whatever. We need to be closer to the metal. We need some compiled languages in order to fulfill the requirements in the Python domain. But yeah, Python has come a long way. We have performance packages. We can use Thyson, number, etc. to speed it up. So I don't think that this is a problem anymore. And the success and the widespread adoption speaks its own language in this regard.
Yeah, indeed. And can you say something more specific about the Python Quants Group? And I'm also interested, I mean, particularly, let's say, targeting people that are maybe interested in pursuing a career in research. How's your business? What are the goals, the philosophy of this group?
Yeah, so we first and foremost focus obviously on Python, right? The Python Quants, I think this is a statement. All my books are about Python for finance. And we teach people how to master the skills that are required in today's environment in the financial industry, be it in asset management, be it in algo trading, be it in computational finance. Our team is well versed. We have 4 senior architects, software architects that have built large trading systems, risk management systems, and other platforms. Right, so this is at the core, this is at the heart of what we do, Python. This doesn't mean that we don't use other technologies as well. I don't know, like Elasticsearch, like JavaScript, like this package, like of course, whatever we need. So our philosophy is Python at the core and open source technologies that are powerful and good for us around that. Yeah, we try to be in this context as efficient as possible. So speaking of research, I think we have come a long way with fantastic tools like the Jupyter Lab these days, access to APIs, and even, let's say, to professional data at pretty low prices that even a student, a PhD student can afford these days. You get access to tons of data. And we have all the tools available, not only the packages like NumPy, Pandas, scikit-learn, whatever you want to use in this context, but also Jupyter Lab, IPython. You can go to the cloud, you can use here and there. It's all there. And the only thing that you need to buy is I would say, a medium-sized notebook, some whatever you name it, some MacBook Air M1 is my latest one of my 4 MacBooks, is fully enough, less than $1,000, right? And you can do anything, right? Anything is possible based on such a machine, and you have the cloud where you can scale. So that's it's indeed what I called before democratization, right? Everybody can do stuff that 10, 15, 20 years ago, only the big banks, the big funds could do with multi-million-dollar budgets and dozens of people taking care of the infrastructure.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and so you think there are, let's say, are there benefits in this democratization? So, I mean, should one see algo trading as a zero-sum game in which people are competing against each other, or are there some overall benefits for the wealth distribution? I don't know, for I don't know, something about maybe the detection and financial crashes. Can this democratization do something about this dynamic?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not really sure whether there are high societal benefits of algo trading. Maybe if you ask the guys from Citadel, they say, of course, this is what we make a living off. We help so many people and thousands and millions of people who trade via Robinhood. This is the group to which we provide the markets that they need in order to do their trading and to implement their tips that they get on Reddit, right? I wouldn't go that far, but of course it's one tool that everybody can use. You can say, well, I go to an app and invest a little bit. I use robo-advisors for a very small fee, or I want to have the excitement, have a little bit of background. I want to do it on my own. So we have many delegates in our programs who want to do exactly that, right? They want to come up with a trading bot and try to compete with the big fishes in the pond and try to see how this works. For most of them, I think it's not primarily to get to make a living out of that. It's more like to see how it really works, whether they can set it up, right? To watch it doing. It's like, maybe if you think in terms of autonomous vehicles, right? There are books right now that you can buy, and you can buy small autonomous vehicles with webcams and everything and AI. I think that's like the fun of exploring it, and the barriers of entry are so low, right? That basically everybody, again, like a single machine, less than $1,000 maybe even 500 refurbished, right? It's completely enough to get into that game. You don't even need to buy any other hardware, like a camera for your autonomous vehicle, because the financial market is in that sense much more simple to enter with bot, right? You simply place buy and sell orders, and that's it. And of course, there must be some data processing, but that's not a big deal anymore. Therefore, that's fantastic. Whether this is beneficial from a societal point of view, I wouldn't position myself. Of course, we need the market makers that provide liquidity, not only in the traditional markets, but also in cryptocurrency markets, for example. This is simply something that is required. So algorithmic trading is not only about trying to beat the market, it's also used to make markets more efficient, provide liquidity, right? And or to execute large blocks, for example, taking into account liquidity effects, etc. I would say overall it's probably beneficial, but of course, there, as you're saying, if it's indeed in the end a zero-sum game, probably also a few losers. But if you want to sell something and somebody else wants to buy, or vice versa, this is the decision that you make or your bot is making, right? So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. If you win more often with the same profit potential, right, then you lose, then that should be okay.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I wanted to ask this question because I often come up. I'm an algo trader myself in crypto, and I often come up with these people, I don't know, in Instagram, TikTok, with these big cars and saying, okay, you should do what I do because I do this, I live like this, and so I'm cool. But it seems like they're promoting a pyramid scheme of some sort. So my question was how to distinguish myself from them. Is there some strong principal difference from them? So that's why I asked that.
I mean, how to distinguish from the scammers on Instagram?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I was really surprised to get into that world. I'm not really active on Instagram, at least not professionally. And I get approached by really people, and it's supposed to be women, right? Also good-looking women who somehow promised, I don't know, 6%, 15% return per week with I ask, what is the strategy? What are you doing? And it was ridiculous. There's so many scams and all these airdrops things. And I mean, it's the wild west. Everybody tries to make their own riches, right? Or to scam people and to get their hands on other people's money or crypto, right? So I don't know. I don't really know. Simply go straight ahead and do proper stuff in this context.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I am really surprised of this whole ecosystem, how this has evolved. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
You mean in terms of scamming? I mean, people on social media.
Yeah. That's. I mean, the whole area is anyways Wild West, but this is really, I don't know. It's the underground of the Wild West.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about the difference between what you were doing, let's say, during your PhD thesis, a lot of math, of modeling, so not data-driven techniques like AI. So do you think this computer science perspective, this data-driven approach, is substituting, at least in finance, the old perspective, or is there still some room for, I don't know, physicists in the game?
I mean, physicists also deal with large amounts of data, right? I mean, like in finance, where we used to have like model quants, I think the number of model quants in relationship to other applied quants is absolutely minuscule. I mean, if a big bank has, I don't know, 5 model quants, that's already a lot, but they might have 500 or 1,500 other quants doing like the regular stuff. The same holds true for physicists, right? I mean, I'm not a physicist myself. I'm not following on archive what they publish, right? But I would suppose that most of them work on a daily basis more with data than with equations only. Of course, you will also have the theoretical geniuses like you have in math that do pure math. Maybe they do pure theoretical physics. But most of them will be concerned with that as well. And I think that they have valuable skills that they can transfer, again, as well in a similar fashion, like in the 80s, 90s to Wall Street. But of course, there's always room for first principle thinking and working up from the foundations, but it's much harder as compared to simply having a data set and applying whatever techniques. I find myself doing that as well. When I read something or see something, right, I simply pip install it in Python or conda install it and just let it run on some data, some other data set. It's so simple. I don't even need to think, right? This is some automatic stuff. And I think that might be a little bit the problem there, that it has become really easy, right? And you don't need to sit down with pen and paper anymore if you don't want to, in order to apply all the wonderful techniques, packages, functions, whatever you have, the algorithms to the data. But of course, finance has become a data-driven discipline, right? What used to be relationship banking, when you just think, and this is now a bit further away, but I think this is a very good example in this regard. It used to be a relationship-oriented business, right, with your local thrift institution, or here, as they're called in Germany, the Sparkasse. You want to buy a house or an apartment, you go there, they know you since you're a little child, and they say, well, you know what I'm doing, you see what I earn on a monthly basis, etc. I want to buy this, that's the amount, what are the interest rates, and am I credit worthy? Yeah, you are here, of course. Yeah, I expect you to be a good debtor. And what is it today? It's all about data, right? You have the comparisons between 1,000 or millions of people in this regard. The machines make the decisions in this context, and from the personal relationships, it has become an absolutely data-driven thing. This is when even when you speak to people, say, well, I can do here anything, these are the rules. And what they mean by rules is simply the data says yes or no. Right? So simple classification algorithm, you have, I don't know, 100 features or 50 features or 200 features. And then you get like your output in terms of like, yes, credit, or no credit, or whatever the specific decision is. And the same holds true basically in the markets as well. You might have people sitting there and watching Bloomberg or Refinitiv Workspace on a daily basis and following along and making some decisions. But this is mostly done, as we know, by algos anyway. So it's not the advent or the rise of AI here that is driving, for example, the trading board business, the algorithmic trading. It's anyways driven by algos, but these are different algos in general that trade stocks. I mean, the volume is 80 to 90, 95%, which is driven by machines and not by humans anymore, right? Nobody is like calling, shouting around anymore. So that's we've come a long way in many areas, and finance is a good example.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. And so your interest is across the board in finance in general. So commodities, forex, cryptos.
Yeah, I must say I'm mostly coming from the equity side, forex. Yeah, not that much commodities, also not that much rates product. So forex and equity, that's usually with volatility. I mean, one of my books is about list of volatility and variance derivatives, but I consider this to be a sub part in this context of the equity world. So that's indeed my background. I never had really the need to master everything related to rates products or swaps. I mean, I think I have a basic understanding, but I have two people in my team that are much better with that stuff than myself. Yeah.
Right. And so you think, is it better to think about finance as because many algorithms are usually autoregressive, sorry. And so the idea is that the information of how to classify the behavior is contained in the price of the object itself. But you also mentioned unstructured data before, like social media tweets. Elon Musk tweets something, I don't know, something happens in an unstructured manner, and there's an external input. How important are these, in particular, in traditional markets?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just read a book. I mean, reading a very formal book is already a little bit dubious to say it that way, but I read it to some detail at least. It's a book which was first published in the 80s. It's called Modeling Financial Time series, and when you're talking about autoregressive stuff, and it's all about basically these models have their origin there, like adjunct and a few others, like simple autoregressive models. There's like one part in the finance world or one area, one subfield, which is a certain approach to modeling. And the typical questions are indeed, are expected returns predictable, right? Are risk variables such as variance or standard deviation volatility predictable? With regard to the first, usually not. So we are usually in an environment that we're faced with, which is maybe not characterized by random walks, but probably by the efficient market hypothesis. Are there inefficiencies that you might be able to exploit? Probably yes. You see autocorrelation in markets, and then we need to distinguish also between timescales. So, right, well, what you see is that typically on an end-of-day basis, everything is pretty efficient, right? Because everybody's taking care. And what are my positions towards the end of the trading day? Am I rightly positioned or not? Do I need to do something? But intraday, the world might look a little bit different, at least, and also with regard to maybe less liquid instruments. But still, the question remains in this context. Can I exploit anything that I might have discovered in terms of a statistical inefficiency? Can I turn this into an economic inefficiency by implementing a certain trade? And that's the big deal there, right? You kind of a wonderful prediction method, model, whatever you want to call it. If you're not able to exploit it, where's the value in there? Why? The value might be for somebody like me, like teaching, writing, publishing, right? Creating content, or for a researcher. But if you really want to capitalize on what you have discovered on the statistical side, then you need to have a strategy that you implement, given all the market imperfections, meaning market microstructure. You have liquidity effects, you have transaction costs, you have slippage, you have so many things that you need to take into account. And in the end, in order to for such a strategy to pay off economically, many things must be satisfied. And when you then think, and this is what I usually teach, because the efficient market hypothesis, not only teach, preach, I must say, dates back to the 60s, and it was more formalized during the 70s, and was slightly improved, let's say, in terms of the formulation in the 80s, 90s, etc. But what we need to take into account, and there's like one wonderful paper, it's called Efficient Markets and Prediction, I think, by Granger and somebody else. If of interest, I can look this up, which says, well, we need to indeed add one more element to the efficient market definition, and it's the technologies, the prediction models that are available, right? And this is really where I try to make hope. I spend a little bit of hope to the people who study what we are studying, in the sense of that coming from the 60s, 70s, no computers around, basically ordinary least squares regression, the only methods that could somehow be implemented, right? And now we are in a world where we have natural language processing models with 1.5 billion features. Mm-hmm. We have large-scale clusters where companies like DeepMind with AlphaZero have mastered the games of Go, chess, and shogi with a single machine. So we've come a long, long way. And if you don't take into account innovation in this context, so what do we have available hardware-wise, software-wise, algorithmic-wise, data-wise, and implementation-wise as well, it's difficult to talk about it. Of course, overall, I would say markets are efficient. There's hardly any strong autocorrelation. I mean, you have always autocorrelation between prices. So I'm talking about now the returns and typical prediction models in this context. That you can exploit, right? But still, it cannot be excluded, and I wouldn't be too negative and say, well, to 100% this will never work, because there are companies out there to make billions and billions with exploiting inefficiencies, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and the wonderful thing is that, again, we have our technology at our fingertips, be it the Mac Mini that I'm working on a daily basis, or my MacBook or whatever. That's basically enough to get started in that business and to get started that endeavor. One of my favorite quotes out of the a book When Genius Failed about the rise and fall of long-term capital management was when Merriweather set up shop, he first needed to put down $10 million for the large computer machines that they needed in order to implement their strategy. Right? It's not $10 million anymore. It's not $1 million anymore. It's not even 100,000. You can get started with $1,000 and less for the things that we are currently discussing. It might not be enough for like a larger company to do like production scale stuff, but in order to get started for a student, for a researcher, for personally interested amateur trader, retail trader, that's the world we are now living in. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. And do you think there's some room, some need at least to push financial literacy? Because I mean, for myself, the experience has been that from academia, I got into computer science, and then I saw the application of it in finance. So I'm not coming from a financial interest by itself. And looking behind, I think it would have been helpful to gain some knowledge into, I don't know, investing, how to handle money, which is not taught that often. So do you think there's some need to change that?
Yeah, it's a good question who you are talking about. I mean, if you're already 60 and afraid you don't have enough cash for your retirement, it's maybe a little bit late, right? Even the best education, which brings you up to speed with your financial literacy, is a little bit difficult. But when I think about my son, who is now one floor up playing games on his high performance gaming PC, which is, I don't know, 5 months old or what, he basically has a good chance if he understands the game. And he recently came up on its own. I haven't said anything. I said it to my wife. I have a little bit of cash. I want to invest it in ETFs. Right? And my wife, Yves, what are ETFs? And then I explained it to her, and he's now picking up these things, and he's watching YouTube videos. And basically, if you're really like focused, you can learn that stuff on YouTube, at least the basic stuff. If you're interested in some passive investing at low cost, and you want to do it long term, like a savings plan, that's easy enough to implement, right? You open an account with the broker, and it's like, I would say, a matter of a few hours, invest, and you're good to go. But if you want to learn the trade, and this is what I would then recommend to my son if he is really interested in, I said it today already in another interview, is you should study mathematics carefully, right? You should know quite a bit of programming. Let's say Python, stick with Python, my language is good enough. Other languages would do as well, but Python, I think, is the most flexible one. Like English is the standard, least common denominator around the world. And if you know good enough math, if you know good enough programming, and if you understand English good enough, right, you can master anything else. I think with these prerequisites, it's easy and simple to master finance, to get financially literate, or to master any other field in this context. But certain basics need to be there. Either you go fully passive and say, well, yeah, I understand this intuitively, or if you want to do a bit more, like want to do your trading, want to implement a bot, want to implement your own asset portfolio optimizer, for example, then math, Python, and English is a necessary prerequisite, right? Must be there. So this would be my recommendation. And of course, you could today easily start this already at middle school, where you talk about the economy, etc. We in Germany, at least, we have only a couple of schools that have some kind of focus. So my son is going more to a science-focused gymnasium, as it's called here, like high school, and doing computer science is a major topic. But still, why not teach such a fundamental thing, right? How to save, what to do, what is the world about, what is an ETF, what is a mutual fund, what is the difference between that, and all these. It's easy enough. I mean, this can be 1 hour, 1 school hour, 45 minutes per week. That would be enough to learn the basics. Because this is really what helps you later on. Honestly, I don't know if you know lots about geography, if you know lots about biology, if you know lots about chemistry, if this really helps you in life, if you are not becoming a biologist, chemist, etc. Right? But everybody, no matter what they do, indeed, in life, if they have what you're calling financial literacy, and understand a little bit of economics, maybe not politics, nobody understands politics from my point of view, should be then good to go and maybe have enough for retirement.
Yeah, thank you. Can we go back to, you mentioned cryptocurrencies. What's your opinion on cryptos, blockchain, NFTs even? I really don't have an idea about NFTs, so what's your take on these topics?
Yeah, first of all, I find the whole complex of crypto, I usually talk about crypto, whatever this means, cryptocurrencies, crypto technologies, or whatever. I find the technology part of it pretty amazing. And I'm not talking about blockchain. I mean, if cryptocurrencies are gone and blockchains are left over, that's not my point, but everything related to it, like hash functions, encryption, signing, even the mining idea, like the blockchain idea per se, right? And you have like immutable database, Merkle trees, and all these elements that are so relevant here in this context, and they're so nicely put together for the first time by for the Bitcoin protocol or setup framework, right? This is fantastic. I'm currently teaching, and today I had an online session with our program, our online training programs about crypto basics, how to create a Bitcoin address, right? There are a couple of steps involved, a couple of technologies are combined in a very ingenious way. It's not the most ingenious thing in the world, but still, right? If you understand all this, that's a value in and of itself. And for, again, my son, maybe he's 15, it's a wonderful field. So if he studies mathematics, he will be well equipped, plus the programming side, to understand what's going on there, right? As one example, right? You say, I don't know what I want to do, right? But my basic skills are there, so let's move into that. So that's, we said that. So I'm not a crypto investor, I'm not a crypto trader. We teach it in our program with people that come to us who are interested, in particular in that, but that's more the minority, I would say. So it's not like everybody who attends our programs is interested in crypto trading. So crypto currencies, when they speak about currencies like Bitcoin, for me, I've studied kind of intensively monetary theory at university. And to me, this is not, and to many other people as well, is not a currency. It's like a speculative asset, which has no intrinsic value. Then people come around the corner and say, well, yeah, other things also do not have intrinsic value. Yeah, for example, one sign that makes a bill or whatever unit a currency is that you can pay your taxes with it. It's just like one country, El Salvador, that allows to do that, right? But apart from that, you have high volatility, you have high transaction costs. Who pay? I mean, these were the first thing. I just recently read this story for, I don't know, the fifth or sixth time, and every time I read it, right, the first transaction ever was for a pizza, and I don't know the number, is like, it was like 5 bitcoins, right? 5 bitcoins now, roughly, I don't know, 250,000 plus or minus, for the first pizza. This can really be like a currency, right? In that sense, it doesn't really store value because you have drop downs of 50% within 4 weeks. My monitor is saying it's turning off, not good. You have all these scams still, right? Often, I mean, it's also social hacking or people doing their own mistakes. Maybe not a mistake of the system is like when you're getting robbed, right? Somebody steals you $2,000 or whatnot. So in terms of currency, it's not. This is a speculative asset which has made many people rich. I fully agree with that. If they get rich, that's wonderful. But we are not, by far not yet, in a world we say we have left the wild, wild west there and are like in a regular environment. And I'm pretty sure that regulation will come with the strongest force that the regulators can come up with. I mean, it's about like tax evasion and things. And just today in my session, just to motivate the importance of Bitcoin addresses and which role they play, I had like 3 articles from the Financial Times, recent articles, and the one was like a woman sending a letter to an expert of the Financial Times and saying, well, we're about to get divorced. I know that my husband has quite a bit of Bitcoin because he was thrashing about it to his friends, but I don't know where they are. I didn't know how valuable they are. And now when we need to reach the settlement agreement, how can I figure out how much cash, crypto cash is there, what the value is? And basically the problem is basically not at all. Of course, it's not fully anonymous. We all know that there is no blockchain forensics, etc. But still, these are like real world problems that are not really solved. The same for the IRS. Thinking of the US or any other tax authority. Tax evasion is a problem with the divorce. I mean, for the first time I read it, but it's of course clear if you have a little bit of an understanding what is going on there. So I think we are still a long, long way away from like an environment where I say, well, the currency, I mean, the whole system is there to stay, but I wouldn't be too surprised if we get a like small event and it wasn't like a 50% drop within 4 weeks. It's rather, I don't know, a 90+% drop, and we start basically from scratch. Technologies will stay there, but the whole system is completely inflated. Many things from my point of view, a Ponzi scheme. I mean, if you have like 100, 200, 500 tokens per week that are new on the market, how shall this work, right? It's kind of like in part ridiculous thing, but on the other hand, Bitcoin for sure is an absolute success. Also, when you have a look at the market capitalization, whatever this means, so the value of all the Bitcoins outstanding in US dollar, right? It compares to the biggest technology companies that we have, but not that more, right? Compared to the international FX market, it's still tiny.
Yeah, right. And what about NFTs? So in that sense, there's some.
Yeah, that's
an even bigger bubble.
I think so. The NFT mania, I don't get it. I don't know why people are interested in getting a signed transaction, a hash code, which specifies that you personally, me personally, and we are now the owner of you of the one ape who has a weird face, and I'm of another ape who has another weird face. And where the value in that should be, I don't know. These apes can be generated by AIs like in the thousands per minute, and it's not too large a number for sure. So I'm not really getting it. Of course, there is something to art. I was growing up with a little bit of art, and my father-in-law is still to some extent, the older an arts dealer. We have lots of art here in our house, but it's I would say proper art. I'm not saying that everything digital is worthless in this context, but where's the point in saying, well, this is exactly mine? And when they now start like tokenizing the first tweet and this and this and that, I mean, the first tweet has been there since ages. What is now happening if I want to read the tweet where some other person has a claim as a token on? I still can read it, right? They cannot like if I buy a picture or whatever art, a sculpture or whatnot, I put it in the safe and nobody else can see it. But here, usually everybody can see it, everybody can access it, everybody can copy it. The only thing is that you have some certain right on something that everybody else has access to as well and can copy, and it's a little bit difficult to me, right?
Yeah.
it's a little bit like a license of some open source. Everybody's using it, but you have somehow the right, and it's out there. Everybody has it. I'm not fully getting it. And people then talk even one step further about the Web3, and now we get in the same fashion to the metaverse, right? And we buy real estate, we buy houses, we buy, I don't know what, we buy cars there. We've had second world, and I still need to meet somebody who was active for longer times in second world. So we'll see what the metaverse brings. I don't need it. I go with the dogs to the forest and enjoy myself, right? Running or playing around.
I'm definitely skeptic of the maximalists, and particularly for the NFT problem for myself. I mean, I think there's a tension, and you mentioned it with the open source culture. So it seems like this technology came out of, at least at first, as a revolt against the establishment. So to democratize things, to I don't know, like a revolution. But there's some counterintuitive thing in which, okay, now we are bringing on top of this private property in some way, weird way, and I don't get it either. And while being interested in cryptos, I don't see, for example, there's that people discuss a lot about the lack of how do you say, the fact that they're not printed. You cannot print more Bitcoin. But I don't understand the value of that in relation to.
I mean, that's economic theory 101. I think this is what they want us to believe, that if something is scarce, right, you would attach a higher value to it. If you have an unlimited supply, usually the value is pretty low. But here, again, I don't get it either. So there are a couple of things that I don't really understand. I listen to lots of, listen, for example, Bloomberg Radio, lots of discussions in this regard. So to me, it's usually a narrative which explains in hindsight certain things, but I need to come across still some valuable, consistent, comprehensive idea, model, framework, right, to get this all sorted out in this context. Of course, there are single success stories, they are always there, right? But whether this is like a fundamental shift, paradigm shift, I would doubt. But we'll see. Have the drone rocket fast. Maybe this is here. The same
definitely. Thing. I've recently seen a video of David Letterman interviewing Steve Jobs and mocking him for saying that basically an email is just like sending a letter, or YouTube is just like TV. So what's the added value? So, but I don't see it either. So maybe it's better to stop talking about it, because we'll see, I guess. So one last question is about, so you use a lot of AI, of course. And I wanted to ask you about reinforcement learning specifically in the context of algo trading. So what's your take on that with respect to all the other techniques? I don't know, moment-based strategies, mean reverting, complete black box models. What do you think of reinforcement learning?
Yeah, of course, you have traditional model strategies that have worked well on a large scale for the most successful funds out there, right? Also, to some extent, for the less successful funds, and everybody's trying, because there's so much cash, profit, money at stake in our industry. Also in crypto, same thing, right? Same story. There's so much at stake that even a slight edge would make, or could make, a huge difference. Therefore, people try to apply kind of anything, like reinforcement learning, which was so successful in cracking the game of Go, chess, and many other things, right? First of all, I want to say that's a natural thing. Secondly, I'm fascinated by this whole topic as well. So I'm a big fan. I'm currently doing a free webinar series on reinforcement learning, usually at the very same time that we are talking now. So today there's no seminar about that, no free webinar, but there will be one in the next week. And so I like the whole approach. I see, of course, the limitations to the financial domain, because what is kind of like driving the success of, let's say, AlphaZero in cracking the game of Go and chess? The secret sauce or the secret ingredient is that you have a game that you can repeatedly play over and over, and you can even have the AI, the agent, play against itself. So self-reinforcement learning, right? You play against your latest iteration. It's like you personally running around the table, right, and playing white and black for Go or chess. And this at the speed of light in principle, in particular when people like DeepMind with Google in the back, Alphabet in the back do that. That's like not a technological constraint that they face, and also not a data constraint that they face. So they can regenerate 1 million, if that's not enough, 2 million, if it's still not enough, 3, 4, 5 million games, and learn from the generated data. In finance, we unfortunately do not have that, right? We don't have something like a market simulator, which simply has, and if we would have that, we wouldn't need reinforcement learning. But let's do this thought experiment. If we would have a market simulator which would act exactly like the market does, and nobody has something like this, right? It's simply too complex. Then you could have an agent which trades, like, I don't know, at the speed of light in the market, sees feedback from the market, right? And then learns. But what we have, the only thing that we have typically in finance is historical data. And historical data is simply limited. It's not that you say, well, I have like 1,000 time series going on, stick maybe to the S&P 500. 500 times series end of day data going back. Yeah, of course, end of day data, we now have, I don't know, hourly bars. We have 5-minute bars, we have 1-minute bars. Maybe we have even, for a certain period of time, high frequency data, order book data. You can go as granular as you like, but still, it's the data that is there, and that's the past, and you can try to train your model. But the major element of the success of reinforcement learning is interaction and getting feedback given your action. So no matter what the reinforcement learning agent does with historical data, if you fix the data, there's no feedback, right? You simply have the data and you learn something, right? It's like one maze, one labyrinth, right? And that's fixed. Right. It can be as large as possible, right? And once the AI knows the way from A to B or X to Z or whatever, then the problem is solved. But the next maze, maybe, the engine might do kind of well, or might never get out of the maze because this is something completely new. When you now transfer this to the chess and Go world, of course, you can have an AI. It doesn't need to be an AI. There are other algorithms that generate like 1 million mazes, 2 million, 10 million, right? As many as you need in order for an agent to be perfect at getting out in the most efficient way out of a maze, right? So, and that's the problem that we have in finance, that we simply deal with fixed historical data. It's limited, no matter how granular you get, no matter how wide you make the spectrum, etc. So we need to come up with other methods. For example, methods that have proven to be really valuable in other areas like option pricing, hedging, etc. It's Monte Carlo simulation, where you try to simulate the future 100,000 times, 200,000 times, or 1 million times, right? Again, we don't have no limit based on a certain stochastic process. But the stochastic process usually is a pretty simplified version of the world itself. So for pricing, it's kind of nice because you're basically interested in the average only. Whatever the average means, right? There are some complications, but it simply is an averaging game. 100,000, then average of that, and you discount it. So maybe such methods might prove pretty useful. And this is where we have seen success in the application of reinforcement learning to finance, for example, in dynamic hatching. So JP Morgan came out with what they call deep hatching, right? Because this is a much better specified model, because you have deterministic formula which say, well, if the price goes up or the price goes down, then do X, Y, that. These models, they are not dependent, and it's not the goal to learn something like this to predict whether the price goes up or down. But if you want to trade well, you need to have some idea of the prediction, right? You need to somehow learn if the market goes up or down. In particular, when you want to say, well, I have some impact on the market because I'm a big trader, a large trader, right? Then you want to learn what the impact is and what like the optimal strategy is, right? When I have a large block to sell, do I sell it at once, or do I sell it in 2 blocks, over time, sequentially, or 10 blocks or whatever. So that's also a typical problem if you have a proper model that can be learned, because you're not too dependent on the prediction. But as long as we're talking about trading and prediction and benefiting, generating alpha out of that, right? Discovering some economic inefficiencies, that's difficult because of the problem that I described. If you would have the perfect simulator, wonderful, but we don't have it because nobody has it. Therefore, some other techniques, I've played around and I've come up with models that work kind of well with Monte Carlo simulations. So for example, it's relatively easy to parameterize Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process to behave like a trending process, like a stock, or like a mean reverting quantity, like a currency, or let's say the VIX, for example, and that such an agent learns this basic behavior. But this is still on a rather abstract level. I have a couple of other ideas, and I work on that. So maybe if you now jump into my webinar series,
that definitely. But yeah, you definitely
getting now to the more interesting stuff. The first three are on YouTube, so you can everybody can jump on it and jump in it.
You definitely clarified the difference between reinforcement learning and having a deep learning based agent that's trained on historical data. Because basically, there's no feedback from the environment training on historical data, so there's no different from. So the Q-learning framework doesn't make sense. It's just an architecture built on historical data. And so what you're proposing is have a simplified model of the stochastic dynamics of the market, and then do Monte Carlo on top of that, and then do reinforcement learning on all these games, let's say, on this realization.
Exactly. Then you have, like, instead of one time series, let's say for the S&P 500, to make the standard example, instead of the one time series, you can easily have 100,000, 500,000, or 1 million time series, which at least exhibit certain characteristics of the original time series, not perfectly, but maybe good enough to learn certain good strategies, maybe optimal strategies given the parameterization.
And do you think, let's say, data-driven techniques can also be helpful in finding risk-adverse strategies? Or, I mean, do we need something like you describe in your, I think your latest book, correct me if I'm wrong, the Kelly criterion?
The
Kelly criterion?
I saw that in the Kelly criterion. Yeah, I mean, the Kelly criterion comes on top of everything that, right? The Kelly criterion is simply a method. I wouldn't say a rule of thumb. It's like formally proven, and you can calculate the statistics accurately to say, if I have, let's say, 100 units that I can invest, what is the percentage, what is the ratio of what I should invest, given the statistical characteristics of my strategy. So the statistics are related to what might be known by more people, like the Sharpe ratio, right, where you have like an expected return over the standard deviation. Here you have the expected return over the standard deviation squared variance. So it's pretty close to it, but it's not the same thing. And this gives you like the optimal fraction that you should invest from your available capital into the strategy, given that you want to, that's the assumption from the beginning, given that you want to maximize long-term growth given the geometric rate. So this comes from, as many people might know, from gambling, right? And when Ed Thorpe was devising the Kelly criterion, based Kelly according to the information theorist Kelly, it was driven first by his experiences in gambling, where he came up with a formula, right? When you go to the blackjack table and want to somehow maximize your profit given a certain edge that you have, I don't know, 52%, I think currently, according to the rules, is 51 point something, but it depends also on the casino and on the exact rules, right? What is the optimal fraction when you have, I don't know, $1,000 that you are willing to bet overnight or per night? What is the optimal fraction to bet per single game, right? If you want to maximize, given your edge, the statistical edge, and assuming that you don't do any mistake, right? Of course, the casinos, they live off the mistakes and of the hubris of the players, right? And this, of course, can be translated, and this is then the Kelly criterion to trading as well. I'm not gambling here. I'm not saying at the blackjack table. I'm trading, I don't know, Forex, for example, and these are my statistics. And given the statistics of the strategy that I have observed or that I estimate in the beginning, I start, I don't know, with a fraction of 5% per bet, per trade that I'm willing to risk. Or if the odds are better, 50%, right? Or if you have a wonderful strategy, even 200%, so that you go into leverage. So this is not excluded. A fraction can be more than the whole if you have a wonderful strategy with appropriate statistics, which means minimizing the risk of complete loss and again maximizing long-term growth. Then this can mean that you go very small or large and do some leverage as well.
Yep. Really interesting. Thank you. I think I'd like to conclude the conversation mostly because, I mean, you have tons of things out there. So maybe if you could close the interesting conversation by saying where people can find your works, your contents in every way.
Absolutely. So the best way to get started with exploring our world is our webpage, tpq.io. And there you find background about us, you find our books. In particular, we just today have sent out an email to our large email database where we have now announced a new offering for our Platinum package, which includes all our online resources, like 250 hours of instruction and 1,750 pages, HTML, PDF documentation, and tons of resources more. We have now a fully self-paced option. So everything that we offer, that we have, books, trainings, platforms, the AI machine, our proprietary trading platform, in particular now the Platinum package. This is what I'm currently concerned with more or less 24/7 at this point in time. You find on tpq.io. Also on Twitter, if you have my name, Yves Hilpisch, there's only one of my kind in the world. Right? You find me on Twitter, you find me on LinkedIn, you find me on YouTube. We also recently, maybe that's interesting for everybody who's not maybe directly interested in some training or reading books, we have just opened a Discord server called Quants@Dev for interested quant developers primarily, but they're researchers, they're students, they're academics in the group, and we have within a few weeks only we have reached already 550, close to 600 people who are now actively discussing AI, machine learning and finance, trading, Python, packages, content, education, events that are coming up. So sharing videos, sharing papers, sharing thoughts, helping out each other. So I'm really, really enjoying the Discord group. And again, it's like 500 mostly professionals, open to everybody. So you will find all this if you Google me. To stay current, Twitter is good, and our webpage for everything that we currently have.